Up next on Radio Days The Podcast.
It was my first day at WSJM because I got hired in at the news station.
Yeah.
2 minutes away from my first turning on the mic and reading my first newscast on the station. Corey opens up the door of the studio, looks at me and says, "Hey, Gail said that if it's not too much trouble, try not to suck."
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Radio Days, a podcast radio program that delves into the world of terrestrial radio. It's DJs and on-air personality, and you, all fans of radio as a medium. Here's your host, Ron.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Radio Days The Podcast. You can hear this podcast on Buzzsprout as well as all the major podcast platforms, and you can also watch this podcast via YouTube and at ronrobinsonstudios.com. On today's show, we're going to take a highlight and discuss the major differences between small market radio and large or major market radio. To help me do this, I will be joined by a gentleman who I've worked with. In fact, we worked together in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Like myself, has worked in both small, medium, and large market radio, for that matter. Mr. Shaun Kelly from Chicago will be joining us. But first, in case you haven't heard, Radio Days, the docuseries, is in post-production and will be available for release very soon. So stay tuned for upcoming release dates. Also, don't forget to make this podcast, Radio Days, the Podcast, a place where you come back to every single week. Bit of another specialty show for you this week. As I mentioned, we're not going to be delving into too much of a person's career, although we'll be talking about this gentleman's career. Today's episode is which is brought to you by Radio Days the Movie and Team 71 Mortgage in Shelby Township. Today we will be taking a dive and discussing the differences between working at a small market radio station and a major market radio station. Believe it or not, they are not run the same. So my guest today, as I mentioned, has worked in radio in Benton Harbor, WYTZ, Grand Rapids, St. Anne, and in Chicago at WLS. So he's worked in small, major, and medium markets as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend, Mr. Shaun Kelly. How are you, sir?
Shaun Kelly. Come on, proper intro there, bro.
Shaun Kelly. There you go.
So real quick, I used to do a bit called Hokey Karaoke at a small market station in Kankakee, St. Anne. And me and the guy from the talk station across the hall, we did this bit together. So it aired on both stations. So I would call him every morning. I think we did it at like 7:40. So we'd get all the kids going to school on the bus listening. And basically what it was, I'd grab song lyrics, and then the other morning show host who played a character called Hamlet, this redneck backwoods character, he would read the song lyrics, like two lines of a song, and then we'd take a caller, and then they would sing or say the next line in the song.
Okay.
But every morning I called him, how it started out, he'd be like, "Good morning, Shaun Kelly!" So 20 years later, it just stuck.
Yeah. I don't think you could do that in a major market. So before we get into the differences between the markets, obviously I mentioned you've worked in St. Anne, Illinois. You worked in Grand Rapids, which I would think would be considered a medium market. You've worked at WYTZ with me, which is a smaller market. And then you've worked at WLS in Chicago. So you worked the gamut of all different sizes of radio markets. What is your favorite and why?
Well, I don't know about my favorite, but I mean some differences. You want to know those?
Well, no, we're going to delve into that. But did you prefer working in major market or did you prefer working in smaller markets? Because, both of them have their advantages and disadvantages. But for me, I just had more fun working in smaller market radio. So that's why I'm asking you.
I have to agree with that. I definitely love to work in a small market because you connect more one-on-one with the listeners. You get more autonomy. You get to do more things, take more risks. It's just different. It's in a big market, major market, it's all about the suits and by the book, and talk for no more than maybe a minute, shut up, and play the commercials.
And I don't think you didn't go to a school. You didn't go to school for broadcasting, did you?
Yeah, I went to Columbia in Chicago.
All right. Well, let me ask you this, because I was a student at Specs, and there's, when you're a student, you're like, you want to get out of school and work in Detroit. That was the thing. You want to work in Detroit. So
Right.
Detroit's a major market. I mean, the odds of you working out of Specs.
Slim to none.
I think my friend Bill McAllister started at 97.1 right out of Specs, but it's very rare.
Right.
And so, was that the kind of the feeling when you were going to school in Illinois? Is everybody wanted to work in Chicago?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, everybody wanted to step out of Columbia and go work at B96 or US 99 or WLS or, one of the big stations. I wasn't on the air in Chicago. I produced a morning show with Don and Roma at WLS. It was my goal to be on US 99, the CBS then country station, but it just never happened, and kind of bounced around at a couple of small market stations.
Before we get into this list, Shaun, I want to play a clip from the late, great Dick Kernan, who was a mentor of mine, and I met him as a student at Specs, and I worked with him when I taught at the school. But Dick Kernan was a big advocate for small market radio. In fact, here's what Dick Kernan had to say when I asked him about the differences between small and large markets. Take a listen.
The biggest ruse in this business is market size. Market size doesn't mean shit to anybody but the individual person who somehow thinks they hang the moon if they get a fucking job in a major market. Life is good in small markets.
Yeah, so I think, a legend like Dick Kernan, I mean, I know, he's not as well known in Chicago as he is in the Detroit area, but he's done a lot for a lot of people's broadcasting career and radio and in television. But that's what he had to say. But again, I couldn't agree more. I think in smaller markets, it's just it's a more fun experience. It's more of what you think radio would be. Yeah.
Or what radio should be. A lot more fun. Get to take more chances and talk a little bit more. Be more of a personality.
All right, so let's delve into it, Shaun. These are 5 things that we came up with that are different between the differences between smaller and larger markets. Now, one of the things, especially in a young broadcaster's career, is that is an advantage for a small market. You have more autonomy. You're not
right.
You're not having someone look over your shoulder all the time. You can make mistakes, learn your craft. And you're given more of a rope, if you will. You can make mistakes. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, in a major large market, you do something wrong, and then the program director is going to hotline you, call you right away, and basically give you an air check, a couple minutes later. And in a small market, it's more laid back. Of course, there's air checks and critiquing, but it's not. You don't fear for losing your job.
Right, and I think a lot of that has to do with the number one difference, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, little teaser there.
Show me!
You kind of let the cat out of the bag. But it is a cool dynamic when you're allowed to make mistakes and you don't have to worry about the fact that you flubbed a word. Because the first few jobs that I have were in news. So,
yeah.
It's a little bit different than, say, having an on-air shift where, my job, I'm writing the news, I'm preparing the news, I'm adding sound and this and that. But I pretty much utilized all the skills that I learned at Specs about how to put newscasts together. But my very first job was in Ludington, Michigan at WKLA. And
okay.
And they brought me in to do news, and it was a great learning experience. I made some mistakes, but I was just, I was green. But that's something that if I would have went right into a Detroit market, first mistake, first week, you're out of here, buddy. Go find another job.
And I think it's implanted in you in school and in your mind to be perfect. And that's not what radio is. It's not about being a robot.
Right.
It's about being a human being, making some mistakes, being conversational.
Right. I couldn't agree more. All right, number 4. This is one of my favorites, and this was kind of a culture shock because I grew up listening to Detroit radio, and I'm sure you growing up listening to Chicago radio, you didn't hear any of this. But when you go to smaller markets, you're airing obituaries, you're airing, you're airing lost dogs.
Yep.
Yard sales.
Yes.
That's different. You don't hear that in a large market. Talk about
No.
that dynamic of the attention to local community at smaller markets.
Oh, ag reports.
Yeah, ag reports. Or in Port Huron,
reports.
You got the weather reports and the boat reports because yeah, yep.
Well, there's still a station down by me. It's over the border in Illinois. Excuse me, and it's a country station, but they run it like a full service station where you're getting new country, you're getting old country, you're getting news like 2-3 times an hour, you're getting weather, you're getting ag reports. So just a little bit of everything, and you wouldn't have that in a big market.
Right.
It'd be music and commercials and a little bit of talking.
And it's interesting you say that because I want to come back to the time we worked together at WYTZ. So these types of things, airing obituaries, in the yard sales and lost dogs at
High school football.
Well, we're going to get to that. High school
Okay.
sports. We're going to get to that. But I do want to talk about the fact that some stations run their stations like different markets. And I give you an example. Like, for example, we worked at WYTZ together. Gail Olson and the shareholders were from Chicago. They ran that Benton Harbor St. Joe market, which is a small market, like a medium market, because you didn't have those things, but there was still local stuff. It was almost run like it was Grand Rapids. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, and very close proximity. You're an hour and a half from Chicago, 45 minutes from Kalamazoo, hour to Grand Rapids. So you were close to a lot of other big cities.
And yes, and so there was a need to do that. So it was interesting because St. Joe, Benton Harbor is not that much. Well, it is a little bit bigger than Ludington, but nowhere near the size of Grand Rapids or even Detroit. So,
right.
Depending on the size, will dictate what you air on the radio station, right?
Absolutely.
4-H you'd hear on small markets.
Yeah.
4-H
Yep,
you'd hear on
4-H.
small markets. But you brought up high school.
Just a lot more community stuff.
Yes, hyper super local. Where,
Yep.
like in say Detroit or even Chicago. With Chicago, I think that's still the third largest city in the country, right?
Yes. Yep.
So you get a lot of very broad.
Very, very vanilla.
It is very vanilla.
Yes.
So what is Chicago radio like here in 2023? What are you listening to on the radio there?
I listen. So obviously, I've done a country radio most of my life. I really don't listen to the country station here anymore. I listen to the pop station in the morning, Kiss 103.5, which is iHeart. And I listen not for the music. I listen because the morning guy is so good at what he does.
Yeah.
He and the girls and the guy, I mean, they just have a great team. It's an awesome dynamic. And I think he's 41 years old, so he's, he knows the old school stuff, but he just knows how to connect with you. He knows how to talk to you, not at you.
Getting back to the differences, something that you're not going to hear in Detroit radio, you're not going to hear in Chicago, is high school football, high school baseball. You're going to hear that on the radio. Talk about that dynamic, because that's one of my favorite memories of working in St. Joe, Benton Harbor, is working the Friday Night Fever program, where we would not only broadcast all the local high school football games, but we would do a post-game show with highlights, and it was high school football, but we were doing it like it was college or pro, and that was fun.
So when I was doing mornings at X Country and Kankakee St. Anne, we had high school football, and my boss, the operations manager for the AM talk station, he would handle all that. I would get there in the morning at X Country. I'd be doing the morning show. I'd be doing a lunchtime request show. I'd be doing production, promotions, the website, schedule the music. I pretty much was the station. It was like a one-man show. So all that, the high school stuff, he took care of that. We aired it on Friday night, and people loved it.
Did you find it that more people were giving you feedback on that type of programming than when you were at the bigger markets?
Oh, absolutely.
Talk about that if you would.
Well, I mean, people would come up to me at remotes, in the small market, and they would just say, well, we really enjoy high school sports, our kids playing or a friend's playing an hour away, and we can't go to the game, so, we enjoy hearing it on the station.
Well, for me, like I mentioned when I did the Friday Night Fever show, the feedback I'd get from the players and the parents of the, because it's like, they hear these kind of shows about college and pro players, but I'm sure it brings a thrill when your son who plays linebacker for the local high school football team gets interviewed and to be fair, it's not just radio. I mean, the reason that they're on the radio is because much like Texas in Benton Harbor, that was a high school football area. I mean, high school football is king. It's almost like Texas living there. It was very weird, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Now, here's something that we didn't talk about, but I want to mention because one of my stops was at a station called KMAG in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and that's considered Oklahoma, and things are different in the South. Because Fort Smith, although not a major market that you would find in Little Rock, Fort Smith and the surrounding area, it's right at the border of Oklahoma. It was a medium market. However, we would air rodeos on the radio.
Are you serious?
Rodeos would get played on
wow.
our station. Yeah, so that's a different dynamic. That was new to me.
So, like on the weekends?
Well, there was a rodeo that would come to town, the Arkansas-Oklahoma State Fair. Yeah, you heard me. That's what it was called, the Arkansas-Oklahoma State Fair. Anyway, so this
and of course it got sponsored, and the station made money and all that.
All that, and it was like like we had Montgomery Gentry in to play that one year. It was like and one of the things that they would have was this Diablo rodeo. And it wasn't a normal rodeo, Shaun. I'm not kidding. What Diablo rodeo was 4 or 5 cowboys would get in a small area, and they would let 14 to 16 live wild bulls, and the whole contest was not to get gored. That's
a visual thing.
I know, but it was played on the radio. Listen, it's Arkansas, bro. Listen, there's a lot of things that happen in Arkansas that
yeah, I mean, how does that translate over audio through radio? Like
I saw things in Arkansas.
I can't see it.
I saw things in Arkansas that I never thought. I saw a 5-year-old on a full-grown horse handling it like he was a pro. Like,
wow.
You see things. Yeah, Arkansas was a whole other. But my point is, medium market showing rodeo, airing rodeos on the radio. That was
you were there. You were there too long as well.
Yes. But I left our friend Corey there.
How long? What were you there? About 3 years? 4 years?
I was there for just under 3 years. Yeah.
2 years too long.
Well, I mean, it's a mixed bag, Shaun, because it was in 2008, and the economy took a dive, and I went from working at JR, teaching at Specs, and working at Comerica Park to being jobless. So it was either that or work at a steakhouse somewhere, and I wanted to stay in radio. So Corey brought me to Arkansas, and that's when I realized it was almost like when I went to Arkansas, I entered an episode of The Twilight Zone. I'm not even making that up. Talk to Corey, he'll tell you. We've had shows about it. In fact, I think we're going to plan a show. I'm trying to organize a show between me and Corey and a guy named Alex, who also has Midwest ties. The three of us, 3 Yankees working in Arkansas. It was they should have made a sitcom because it was culture shock and it was entertaining.
Next time you talk to C-Dub, I call him C-Dub.
Yes,
Corey.
Tell him what you're going to say. Joe Diffie. Now you can't just throw that out there. Explain that.
He would just he'd stand outside the studio or he'd walk in the studio. And it was just how I back sold or front sold the song. I'd be like, here's Joe Diffie on 97.5 White Country. And it just became a running joke.
Well, it's funny because you know about Corey and I's running joke. Well, it's not a running joke. You know about the first time Corey and I met, right?
No.
It was my first day at WSJM, because I got hired in at the news station.
Yeah.
And I was 5 minutes, actually 2 minutes away from my first turning on the mic and reading my first newscast on the station. Corey opens up the door of the studio, looks at me and says, "Hey, Gail said that if it's not too much trouble, try not to suck." And he closed the door and he walked away, and I was like, what the fuck was that? That's Corey Winfield.
Corey Winfield.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's Corey Winfield. Yeah.
C-Dub.
Anyway, all right. So another thing that's a difference, a big difference between, and you mentioned this to me before we went on the air today, is flea markets. And this is something that I've never experienced, but talk about how sometimes flea markets are aired over. And what kind of flea markets are we talking about? Normal flea markets? Aired on small market?
No, not like a normal flea market. Just people call in, "Hey, I've got this record player," or "I've got hundreds of records in the garage," or "Hey, I've got this car I'm looking to sell." So it's basically just, people selling their shit, but calling the radio station, and then if anybody wants it, they're going to call up.
Okay. And so how does that play on the radio? Much like the rodeo, that's visual too, no?
It plays better than the rodeo on the radio.
Well, give me an example.
Well, just like, I would call up and say, "I've got a computer," or "I've got a car." "Oh, I've got my 2000 Ford Excursion sitting in the driveway. Got to clean it out. It'll be ready tomorrow. I want $4,000 for it." So then if somebody's interested, they'll call the station and put them on.
Wow, that's crazy.
Weird, wild stuff.
And was that something that aired weekly?
Yeah, it was like daily. Like I think they did it like 10 to 11 or 11 to noon. It was like an hour.
Yeah.
Every day.
Here's an event that gets aired on small and large markets, are parades. I've never understood parades on the radio. Yeah, in Detroit, they would, I think for many years, I think they still do air the Thanksgiving Day parade on the radio. I know they used to. And we've done that at smaller markets. I don't understand the parades on the radio.
I mean, I could see for the music or the marching bands or, talking about a school, but that's visual.
Yeah. But before we move on to the number one difference between small and large markets, because this one's a big one, tell me why do you prefer working in a smaller market? I know we touched on a little bit about why you liked it more, but why do you think it's an advantage over large markets? Or is it? If you're working in the industry,
Like I said, I always preferred smaller markets because you could have more fun. You could just get away with a lot more. You could be more creative. You could talk more. You weren't being confined to like a box.
Right.
And in a major market, you're being put in a box, and it's hard to get out of that box in a big market.
Well, for me, and that's like, as a personality, for me in news, the difference between, say, working at WSJM in Benton Harbor and WJR in Detroit is you have more time to work on a story at WSJM than you do WJR. WJR,
slap it together productions, get it in, get it out,
get it on the air, get it on the
assembly
website.
line.
Yes, where in Benton Harbor, St. Joe, and in smaller markets, you can do more legwork, and you have more time to put it on the air. You get sound.
Right.
You have more time to tell a story. You might be able to spend 40 to 60 seconds on a single news story, where at WJR you got 15 seconds. You got to move on to the next one.
Oh, wow. Yep.
So that's a big difference in preparation. That's a big difference in how you cover a story. That's a big difference in the amount of legwork you do before you air it. And I don't know. I just think the way smaller markets do it is correct.
Well, and I think listeners like that. Like, why just give somebody 15 seconds when you probably devoted a minute to 2 minutes to some pieces in St. Joe, Benton Harbor, and you had sound bites.
Sound bites that last longer than 15 seconds. So like, and that's the other thing is smaller markets. We would cover and air stories about fires in Benton Harbor, where in Detroit, there's not a lot of, unless it's a monument, you're not getting a lot of those stories on the radio about fires.
Right.
But
I remember when we were in St. Joe, Benton Harbor, I remember leaving the station one night, and then you and Nick were going to cover the riots.
Yes. You learned a lot from that event. The Benton Harbor riots
Wow.
in
Was that 03? I think it was 03.
Yeah, 03. June 14th, 15th of 03. The only reason those riots stopped was because it started to rain. But, man, that was an intense time. And you know what? That was I'm glad that I had the experience by the time that happened, because me and Nick, we knocked it out of the park with covering that event. That we talk about moment-to-moment news that was happening. I mean, Nick got arrested. I mean, we did a show about that. Nick got arrested.
I remember that.
While he was down covering that story. Yeah.
But weren't you had to be scared.
Fuck yeah, I was scared. Yeah. I mean, because
you didn't know what anybody was going to do.
Well, when I went down there and when the riots, as the riots were starting, I was at Benton Harbor City Hall, and I talked with a local Reverend Pickney, and he says that they're starting to stir up over at Empire and Pavone, which is where Terrence Shern died after a police chase, which is what started all this. And so I went down there, and I wasn't in the news truck. I was in, Drew was a kid at the time, so I had a minivan, and I was down there in my minivan. The window on the driver's side was half up and half down, and the electrical, it didn't work. So the window was half up, half down, and I get out of my vehicle with my WS.
All that money you were making in that small market.
I was printing money,
making it rain hondos.
Yeah, not really. But I got out with my WSJM microphone, and almost immediately people started throwing shit at me. I mean, I was white and I was in Benton Harbor. Mm-hmm. They wanted no part of me there, especially in media. They didn't want none of that either. So I got back in my minivan, and I started to pull away because people continued to throw rocks and bottles at me, and then this guy, I saw him from 50 feet away. He had a bottle of Mad Dog, and I only know that because it ended up in my truck.
Was it the fruit punch?
He took a
swig.
Was it
the fruit punch?
He took a swig, and he tossed it, and it came through the window and hit me in the head and went in the back. And so I got back to the station, and Nick was just coming up there with his dog wanting to find out what happened. He was all calm and cool, and my adrenaline's pumping like 100 million miles an hour, and I'm telling him what happened. And he's like, calm down. But my adrenaline was pumping, And so I think we had to turn that bottle over to police. I don't think we have that bottle.
Evidence.
Yeah. But then Nick went down there and got himself arrested, and the guy driving him around got shot. It was crazy. Yeah. I did a whole show. If you want to hear the whole story, go check out the podcast I did with Nick Rykovich. I think it was in season 2. But I'll leave the exact episode in the description below. But yeah, again, the coverage we had of the Benton Harbor riots and the news we were able to get on the air as quickly as we did, it felt like we were a major market when that was happening, because we were getting newsmakers. We were talking with Jennifer Granholm. We were talking with Jesse Jackson. We were talking with all these national leaders, because they all came to town.
Yeah, that was a big national event.
Yeah, they all came to town. And then just as quickly as they came to town, when the news trucks were in town, because the national media came too. Yeah. But when the national media left, all the big names left. And Benton Harbor, I still think, is dealing with freaking crappy water, and it's a fucking shame. Anyway, I digress.
As you digress.
Yes. Love that city. Love St. Joe. Love Benton Harbor. I love that community. I just, yeah. Glad I got to spend some time there. And you know what? There's something to that. Because I always said if money wasn't an object, I would go back and listen to St. Joe. Live in St. Joe. It's so beautiful. The water there.
Oh, yeah.
A friend of mine, Mike Staff, he got famous working at WRIF and started his own DJ company. He lives in Traverse City now because that was one of the first stations he worked at, and he loved the community, and now he lives there. So, and I think you see that a lot where people in major markets, they go back and live at one of the first job locations, smaller markets, because the community is just,
Yep.
It's gorgeous. But anyway, I digress. So let's get to the number one difference between small and large markets? And you kind of gave it away a little bit.
Show me the money.
Big disparity in the differences between working in smaller market and larger markets.
Huge.
My first job in radio paid $21,000 a year.
Do you want to know what I made as a producer working for Don and Roma at WLS in Chicago?
Do share.
$8 an hour.
Holy crap.
$8 an hour. Laughable.
And you loved it. You would have done it for free, though.
I loved it because I can, have those call letters on my resume forever.
Right.
I think the most I ever made in radio was, and I was doing sales too. So the station in X Country in Kankakee, St. Anne, I was doing, I think my base was 34,000 a year. But then I added on some sales and remotes. I think I got 38 or 39, but that was the most. So that's why I would supplement my income with weddings, DJing weddings every 25, 30 weeks out of the year.
And I do, yeah, go ahead.
Because, you just can't survive on $38,000 a year with a family.
And a lot of that, of course, the reason for that is because in smaller markets, there's less revenue coming into the radio station because there's less people available to sponsor. As in bigger markets, there's more businesses. It's bigger numbers.
Yeah, but you still got the salespeople in small markets making $100K.
Exactly. If I remember correctly, Bob Buchholz, Brenda Lane, they were
were
making it rain. Brenda Lane was a great salesperson.
Brenda, Steve Shalhout,
yes.
Bob Buchholz. Remember the director of sales, Bob
Burnham. No, Bob.
No.
It wasn't Bob Buchholz.
Bob Bolak.
Bob Bolak. There was a lot of Bobs in that sales department.
That dude was a pimp.
What do you mean he was a pimp?
He walked around like he was the shit. He was a younger, good-looking dude.
Right.
And probably couldn't have been. Probably more than probably 35 years old.
I have this. I don't remember what
department.
I don't remember what he looked like, Shaun, but in my head he looks like Michael Scott from The Office.
Oh, that's funny.
Sales, you bring up sales. Sales is something that not a lot of listeners think about, but man, salespeople are always in the ears of radio personalities and programmers because I don't know. You ever bump heads with a salesperson? Because there's a conflict between sales and on-air people.
I've had a few run-ins because sales always dictates to programming and on air
right.
what's gonna happen. It's all about the money. So if it's Thursday and they needed a commercial on the air on Friday the next day, well, by golly gee, you better stay till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night and get it done.
Right.
It revolved around sales.
I have and this is a thing, you mentioned all those Bobs and Brenda and all the folks that worked in sales. You talk about him being a pimp or whatever, but they were good at what they did.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, I mentioned earlier, we were talking earlier about my stint in Arkansas. When I went to Arkansas, and I'm not going to mention any names, but oh my gosh, the things that I ran into over there, Shaun, were amazing. For example, I was able to score some Taylor Swift concert tickets.
Nice.
So I went to the sales department to see if we couldn't get a package together where we could put a limo service, airfare, and make it like a package, make it exciting, sell it, get some dollars into the station. In their ultimate wisdom, my first remote broadcast to try to give away these first off, it was like pulling teeth to get them to do anything about it because they were so set in their ways. But once I finally got them on board and we did all the thing, my first remote for Taylor Swift, John Deere tractor place. A lot of young girls hanging out at John Deere these days, right?
Yeah.
And this was when, this is when what was that guitar song that she got a lot of love for was on the radio. I can't think of it. Anyway.
Oh.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Anyway, but yeah, you might get a horrible sales department in a smaller market, where in a larger market, if you're a crappy salesman, you're gone quick, because in a larger market, again, much like being on the radio, nobody got time for that.
Yeah, you've got a longer leash in
a small market.
A small market.
Because in a large market, you got to produce now.
Yep.
What
If
did
you
you
ain't producing now? You gone.
Did you see an instance where that happened? Talk about that.
Oh yeah, I saw it on air and in sales. I mean, if I had one job and I thought I was doing very well, but the program director and the morning show co-host we weren't clicking, weren't jiving.
Right.
So I think I was there. This was at B100 in South Bend, and I was there 3 months. 3 months, and I was driving like 90 miles, 95 miles one way, 5 days a week for that. I think for like $25,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you had a ball doing it, right?
Had a ball doing. I mean, I was doing nights, but yeah, the program director was just a jag. And then the morning show co-host, who now works in Chicago, she's just yeah.
If you can't say something nice, don't say it at all. Is that what it is?
I'll save the choice words for off the air.
Well, there you have it. Those are some of the major differences between smaller and larger markets. Did we miss any? There's some that we didn't cover because, again, these are just a few of them. There's so many differences between working in smaller and larger markets. And although there are higher stakes and you get more reward for working in a larger market, more notoriety, more fame, if you will, for my money, on a day-to-day basis, as far as enjoying your job, I think smaller markets, I enjoyed it more. Now, that might not be everybody's experience, but that was mine.
Well, our friend Wild Bill in Benton Harbor, St. Joe at Y Country.
Him and I did the morning show, the Wild Bill and Ron show. Yes.
And Ron.
And to this day,
Ron.
I'm still called and Ron by people. Yes. Go ahead.
But he always, and he's one of my 3 mentors in the business. He just said, be somebody's friend through the microphone. Be conversational. Connect one-on-one with them. And they'll follow you around. They'll come to remotes. They'll call you. You'll build up this huge following.
Yeah.
And, that's what radio's about.
Yeah. Well, he taught me a lot, too, about because when we started doing the morning show, I didn't want to tell him what I was going to say. He didn't like that. But, he taught me a lot about broadcasting with a partner. So it was a learning experience because I was a news guy. Coming into to do a morning show, it was a different thing. But it fit my personality.
That was your first morning show gig, right?
Yes, it was.
As a co-host?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. So there you have it. Shaun, I want to thank you again for coming on and being a part of this program. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ronacy.
That's right. That's right. And again, if we've omitted something, or if you can think of something that that is a big difference between smaller and larger markets, please don't be afraid to shoot me an email.
Hit us up.
Yeah, hit me up. Thank you again to Shaun Kelly, and thank you for checking out Radio Days, the podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Team 71 Mortgage Group. Are you looking to buy or refinance your home and have questions that need answers now? Call Brian Allure, 810-444-6466. That's 810-444-6466. Today's show is produced by Ron Robinson Studios. If you need professional marketing videos, professional photography, headshots, maybe you need drone video, head over to ronrobinsonstudios.com. You can also hear previous episodes of Radio Days, the podcast, there as well. Also, if you'd like to learn more about the upcoming docuseries about the history of radio, Radio Days 101 Years of Radio, click on the Radio Days, the movie link under the documentaries tab at ronrobinsonstudios.com. Thanks again for checking out the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time.
You can't go. All the plants are going to die.